let me now turn to Mr. Quinton Romanos, who will share with you some of his perspectives from his committee. Mr. Romanos.
People will not. Good morning, Cheyenne. I was very pleased and honored to be asked to come here and talk to you about the Native American perspective on what data means to us. And I can tell you that we really don't have enough time to really get into it. There's so many different variables that go into these issues, so I will speak about a few that are very important. First of all, I want to say that, I'm full-blooded Cheyenne from Oklahoma. I'm a product of public school, college, 2 years of military service. And unfortunately, to go through all that and to be considered by one part of society as being an educated person, I knew nothing, very little, about my own tribe, the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes. And so I will speak to that later on, but I think there's a lot of work yet to be done. I am a member of the National Indian Education Association Board. We are one of the oldest, we are the oldest Indian advocacy organization for Indian education. And we have offices here in Washington, D.C. We have a national conference every year. We also have an Indian Legislative Summit every year. And this year, our president, Will Gilbert, gave a State of Native Education address. And you can obtain that at the website, www.niea.org. And in it, it reiterated the condition of Native education, and it's not very good, especially for dropouts. We're just talking about, the picture and the data that's given about dropouts. Well, for Native Americans, I would suspect it's even worse. I mean, because we're so mobile and moving around, and they move from one community, one school to another, and they say they're going to enroll, and they never do come back. And I say that with 16 years of experience of working in public school. Now, throw into that picture, when we say Native American, American Indian, we're talking about 560 plus tribes in the United States. And so I am employed by the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes, my own tribe, as the tribal education director for my particular tribe. Now, if you want an example of what that would mean, we have a tribal government just like the 50 states have a state government. We, as the education department, we assume the responsibility for the education of our members. Now, it's not something that is written anywhere. It's just that because we are Cheyenne Arapahos, because we consider ourselves a tribal nation, we assume that responsibility. So when you throw into the variable situation of 561 tribes, and each of them have members throughout the United States and even throughout the world, what is the obligation of public education for Native American students? And I can say that looking at the information, looking at the data, tribes can play a crucial role in the development and the support of success of our Native students. I think with availability of data for tribes, for Native organizations such as NIEA, we can make and advocate issues for local, state, and federal government that's going to affect Indian education. I work in Oklahoma. We have the largest Native American student population in the United States. There's a lot of work to do. Most of our students in Oklahoma are educated in public education. We have 39 tribes in Oklahoma. We are asking that tribal nations be given an opportunity to give concrete input, to give concrete strategies as to how we can solve this issue of providing for more Indian graduates in each of our states and each of our schools. In Oklahoma, we are looking at other models that I think are going to be very successful for the future. One model comes from Montana, which promotes an Indian education for all concept. Basically, what it's saying is that the ideals, the concepts of what Indian education and tribal nations is all about is good for all of public education. It's not just good for the tribal members. And if you consider that real quickly, terms being thrown around like sovereignty, federal trust responsibility. If you don't understand what that means, then you probably have not heard of those terms. And in the Indian community, we use those terms quite a bit. We have a federal trust responsibility with the government. And unfortunately, the majority of our public schools do not realize that. Tribal nations had this relationship with the tribal government. Historically, they were called treaties. A lot of our tribes had treaties. Because of the relationship, because we are tribal nations, we do have a role in the education of our tribal members. And because the public education educates our members, we would like to have a more concrete role in being able to make some decisions. I wanted to speak very briefly about the success of Native American students. The data will show, National Indian Education Study is just now being developed in the last few years, that data will show that whenever you integrate culture into education, it also benefits the student. It makes the student more successful. There is going to be a report issued this summer by the Office of Indian Education on the executive order on Indian education, in which they're going to talk about what effects culture has on education. And I say that because it's very important. If we're going to move forward with public education, we need to have the input of all parties concerned. We need the tribal nations. We need local advocates groups. We need parents to be aware of what information is being provided so that they can go to schools, they can go to the principals, to the teachers, and ask the right questions. And I say that with the understanding that when I was in public school, we did have some parent committees, and they were required because the school district receives federal grants. A lot of the schools that have a substantial amount of Native American students, they may have a Johnson O'Malley program, they may have a Title Indian Education program, and then some schools may even receive impact aid monies, the result of having Native American students in their school district. Through these mechanisms, Indian parents were able to give input into the school district. But without any information from the school district, without any reliable information, I don't think that they were able to give the right input that needs to be given. And what I'm asking is that the data that's being provided to local groups needs to be open, it needs to be available. Local parent committees, any parents need to be able to ask for the data so that they can ask questions. Now, the newspaper report that you were given about Mississippi, that's not uncommon. In Oklahoma, we have a dropout rate, and if you're an Indian educator in Oklahoma, we look at the rate and say, no, that's not right. We know that's not right. And so, the future of Indian nations, the future of states, the future of America is dependent upon us moving forward. I would like to say it in closing, the use of data in NCLB is very important. I see that it's going to become very important for tribal nations because I think tribal nations are assuming more responsibility for the education of its members. I would like to close with the ideal and the concept that many of Indian educators do have, and that's the NCLB, the ideal of no child left behind. Well, that concept, that ideal, is a Native American tradition. If you go back in all our traditions, all our histories, no matter what tribe it was, if your Plains culture or what have you, before America was America, each tribal nation, they took care of its own people. They did not leave any child behind. So, thank you very much.